There we go. All right, so welcome to Better with a Crowd, the basics of crowdfunding. This presentation is designed to give you some background information on how nonprofits have used crowdfunding and to tell you some of the steps involved with starting your own campaign. Although we're going to be focused on nonprofits, this information is really useful for anyone hoping to start a crowdfunding campaign, if you're an individual, an entrepreneur, an artist, or anyone else. But before we start, I just want to say that I feel particularly comfortable discussing this topic with you today for a couple of reasons. First, as the librarian in charge of the Funding Information Center here at the New Jersey State Library, as part of my responsibilities, I assist nonprofits with the grant-seeking and fundraising research process. And the basics of nonprofit fundraising are actually very similar to what you have to have in place for crowdfunding. So if you're already a nonprofit that's fundraising, a lot of this information will seem pretty similar. And secondly, my husband ran 2 crowdfunding campaigns to publish a board game. The first was unsuccessful, and the second exceeded its goal. So both campaigns were amazing learning experiences about what's needed to be successful with crowdfunding. So the information I have is also from some firsthand experience. Let's start by talking about what crowdfunding is. It's a very simple concept, and I think we've basically been crowdfunding things for years, but the name itself is new given that we're doing more online. So crowdfunding, as we discuss it today, refers to using an online platform such as Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Rally, or any of the other websites that are now around today to raise small amounts of money from a large number of people. The idea is that a crowd together can have as great an impact as a single investor with deep pockets. It's a way to galvanize younger supporters because the platforms are online and the campaigns can be shared through social media very easily. Although we'll talk a little bit later about how you can't depend on social media to market your campaign alone. When crowdfunding, the nonprofit or whoever is running it sets a funding goal and a period of time when those funds can be raised. And if you think about the charts maybe you've seen around where different organizations are fundraising, it's an online equivalent to that where you're kind of coloring in the paper as you raise money. Because of the short amount of time, donors know that they have to make their donation, or another way of looking at it is that an investor has a short amount of time to make an investment, or else they're going to lose their opportunity completely. Usually there's levels of funding, such as $5 will get or do something different from $10 or $20. And your donors are encouraged to spread the word because everyone's sort of in it together to see the campaign succeed. And like I said, it's not just for nonprofits. This really started with the business entrepreneurial community, and then it's really moved into nonprofits. Artists, musicians, filmmakers, individuals with personal needs are using crowdfunding as well. So let's take a look at an example. This is a current crowdfunding campaign for the Calgary Public Library, and their foundation is running this. So we're going to actually go to this, and I'm going to point out a few things. This is for an idea lab, and it is they have the building, but this is for some of the things that are going into the idea lab. And this is hosted on Kickstarter. So you can kind of see in the right, the top right, we have their funding goal, which is $75,000. Since this is from Canada, they have that $509 in there because of the difference between Canadian dollars and American dollars. But they've raised $14,000 from over 200 backers, and they still have 4 days to go. So if you're interested in backing this, there's still time. Up at the top, we have a video. And as we scroll down, we'll see more information. There's links for social media right at the top, so it's very easy for backers or other people who are coming to the page to share what they're seeing and share the campaign. We get some information in the middle here about what the project is about. And then over on the right are their different levels, and with the levels are different rewards. So you don't have to offer rewards, but sometimes this is something to incentivize people to give. And their rewards are actually very interesting. They have a lot of stuff with Legos, they have bookmarks, they have some events, nice tote bags. So this is actually a really well put together Kickstarter page. It's very aesthetically pleasing, very interesting to look through. And below this information about the rewards is a little bit more about the project itself, all of their plans. This Kickstarter is actually phase 1 of a multi-phase project. They have their risks and challenges, frequently asked questions. So it's very informative for the person considering making a contribution. All right. So that's just give you a general sense of the things you'll see. Every platform is a little bit different. However, by and large, they will include very similar things. They'll have that funding goal. They'll have information about who's backing it, ways for you to share it, and information about the project. So let's talk a little bit about the impact of crowdfunding for the organizations that use it. Earlier this year, the Girl Scouts of Western Washington received a donation for $100,000, but there was a catch. The donor only wanted the money to be spent on Girl Scouts who are biologically female, not on transgender Girl Scouts. And rather than accept a gift that would only benefit some of their Girl Scouts, the nonprofit returned the check. And you can imagine that was pretty difficult to do for a $100,000 contribution. So they decided to set up an Indiegogo campaign and call on donors to help them to replace that money. They launched 100,000K for every girl with the hashtag, they branded it. And in a month, they raised over $330,000 from over 7,000 people across the country. This is a really great example of a campaign that attracted media attention. It was a very compelling need. Something that I think resonated with people not just from Western Washington, but from all over the country, all over the world. And so it worked really well with crowdfunding, and they were very successful. A little bit closer to home, the Ocean First Foundation has started an annual Crowdrise challenge. They've done this for the past 2 years, and this is for their grantees and other nonprofits in their giving area, which is around Ocean County, parts of Mercer, Middlesex, and Monmouth County as well. And Crowdrise is another platform for hosting a crowdfunding campaign, and it's a little different from Indiegogo and Kickstarter because it provides a way for you to collect money for different organizations at the same time. So within the Ocean First Foundation's challenge, these nonprofits competed to raise the most money and win additional grant money. The top 3 nonprofits received additional grant funds. And altogether, all of the different nonprofits that were participating raised over $336,000. All of the nonprofits had a really good ask for their donors because they were saying, if you donate, help us win, help us get more money. And the Ocean First Foundation included some weekly prizes as well for most shares and likes and things like that. And all of the nonprofits that participated got to keep whatever it was that they raised. So even the nonprofits that didn't place in the top 3, they still had money that they had raised through this fundraising. And then there's potato salad. So it's lunchtime. Maybe you're thinking about eating or you're already eating at your desk. This Kickstarter campaign was created by Zach Brown as a joke. He wanted to make potato salad, and he asked people to help him reach a $10 goal to buy the ingredients. I can't really see if anyone's nodding along or thinking that they would want to donate to help this stranger make potato salad. But he had some interesting levels for funding. So for $1, you would get a thank you posted on his website, and he would say your name out loud while making the potato salad. If you doubled your contribution, he would get a photo of him making the potato salad, and he would say your name out loud in addition to the thank you and everything. And if you think this is silly, it is, but he raised over $55,000. from nearly 7,000 backers, including thousands of people at that $1 and $2 level. And this is an example of how even a dollar can go a long way to reaching a goal, and these little amounts can really add up for smaller nonprofits and other ventures. So I'm sure that you're thinking to yourself now that you can make potato salad, and how do you get your money? How can you get started with this crowdfunding thing? We're going to start by asking whether or not you should crowdfund. In the early days of Kickstarter and Indiegogo and a lot of these platforms, it was so new that people were going to the sites just to check them out, and some of the campaigns got a lot of traffic and support just by virtue of being there. But that's no longer the case. If you go to any of these platforms and just look around at the campaigns, you'll see that there are many, many out there. So you do need to take some extra steps to stand out, and there are some things that you should have in place that will give you more chance of being successful. So first you want to start with a specific program or service. Few platforms allow you to raise general funds. Typically it's for a specific purpose. So Kickstarter, for example, requires campaigns to create something. Even if the platform you choose allows you to raise money that isn't for a specific project, you should still have an ask in mind, something that would compel people to contribute. Do you have a current, timely, or urgent need? There should be a reason why you're running the campaign at this time. It could just be that you want to run the project and now you need the funds, you're all set to go once you receive the funds. But it could be something has happened in your community, maybe a natural disaster or something else going on that might compel people. And then you may have an urgent need, such as having to return a donation, as was the case with the Girl Scouts, but that would be another reason to crowdfund. Do you have staff time and resources dedicated to running a campaign? Your campaign can't run itself. There's planning involved even before you start asking for donations, and someone needs to be monitoring the campaign throughout its time period. Do you have a network of potential supporters and sharers? So your supporters are people who could donate, and this is your network of people or organizations and companies, maybe organizations in your community that you know you can contact and might be willing to help. Your sharers are people who may not contribute, but they could help to get the word out. If no one knows that you're having your campaign, you won't be funded, so you need to have people you can tap into. And to that end, you should also have a core group of committed backers. We'll touch on why this is so important a little bit later on, but you do have to have guaranteed funds even before you get started. There's nothing sadder than a campaign that has no contributors, and you don't want that to be the case with you. You need to have a jump start at the start of your campaign, and that has to be considered even before you begin. You can kind of think of this as the silent phase of a larger fundraising endeavor. To reach that network, you do need strong communication channels, and that might be a decent open rate for your emails, followers on social media, a reliable list of recipients for print mailing if you want to do that, maybe even people that you can call. But you have to have avenues already in place to spread the word about anything you're doing. It's not something that you can set up once your campaign starts. And you have everything in place except the money. You've done all the planning, budgeting, all of the prep work. All you need is the money. You can't estimate or guess what you're going to need. And when you run your campaign, you're promising your backers that if you're funded, you will do what you say. So if you get funded and you cannot fulfill your promise, you're kind of in trouble. So if you said yes to all of these things, then yes, or maybe you should crowdfund. At the very least, you have a nice strong start. On the flip side, maybe you're thinking to yourself that you have an idea but not much else. You kind of think you could do something, but you haven't pursued it. You don't know what it would entail or what it would cost. Basically, you have potato salad. You have few supporters and sharers because your network is weak, And you don't have really any committed backers. You're not guaranteed to have even a portion of what you need. You have little staff time, few resources, you're already stretched thin, and this wouldn't be a priority. This would sort of be another big obligation for someone. You don't really have a way to communicate with the people that you know. People don't open your emails, your posts aren't really shared on social media because you're not posting very much, and those avenues are not in place yet. You don't really know how much money you need. You can't imagine that would cost more than $50,000 or more than $25,000, but you haven't really looked at it, and you're thinking of best case scenarios even when you do. You assume that once your campaign is online and launched, people will love it and they'll share it and they'll just automatically want to donate and invest, even if you haven't put in the work. Or a campaign will cannibalize your existing donor base. If you already know that your existing donors will not contribute additional funds, or your crowdfunding campaign funds will come at the mercy of your other revenue streams, this really might not be for you. You'll have the best sense of your donors, but you should keep this in mind. And if you said yes to these questions, then no, or maybe you should rethink crowdfunding. If you want to know what it looks like if someone hasn't really prepared too much, it's a little something like this. You could be extremely lucky and be potato salad, or you could be the unfortunate case of make me a millionaire in 14 days, which surprisingly didn't raise any money. So before I move on with the steps in running a crowdfunding campaign, I want to pause here and see if there's any questions.
Okay, and we would like to remind you that you can ask questions via the questions window off to the right there at any point during the webinar, and so you don't really need to wait until you're prompted to do so. If one occurs to you, feel free to type it in.
Great.
Yep, I don't see any, so go on ahead.
Okay. All right. So we've seen the impact, we see some of the prep work, but now how do we really get started? So these are some main steps, and we're going to explore these in a little bit more depth. We're going to start with planning the project. So we already sort of touched on this, but you'll select a fundable project, program, or service. Some projects just happen to be more fundable than others. And if you have a choice, pick something that would be compelling. For an animal shelter, for example, maybe it's the difference between paying for your internet access being not as fundable as paying for cat vaccinations. But you should really have a sense of what you can and can't ask for from your donors. Then you'll conduct all the necessary research. This includes having a realistic budget. Keep in mind that all of the funding requirements need to be considered, including the fees that you're going to have to pay for using the platform, the crowdfunding platform. You won't be receiving all of the funds that you raise. You're also not asking for a profit. This is sometimes a hard thing for people to hear, especially if they're trying to fund a business endeavor. But you want your ask to be as low as possible. For entrepreneurs, this might even involve putting in some of your own money to cover expenses before the campaign starts. You'll need a timeline for completing the work so that you can communicate with your donors when they can see results. People understand that there are delays, but if you start at the beginning with an unrealistic timeline and then fail to meet it, you're going to create dissatisfaction amongst your funders. And then if they view you poorly, that's going to give you a bad reputation. You'll secure potential partners. If you can get other people or organizations or companies to lend their support, you should do so. It adds credibility to your campaign, and it also helps you to spread the word about your campaign through their communication channels. At this point, you should look into legal or financial counsel as needed. If you have questions about taxes or accounting, whether you are allowed to run a crowdfunding campaign depending on what you're representing, you may want to consider contacting a lawyer or an accountant. For government entities, it's unclear whether we can actually do crowdfunding. In last year's legislature, there was a bill proposed, A3378, which was known as the Government Crowdfunding Act, which allowed government entities to crowdfund, but it never made it out of committee. So at this point, it's not really clear what government entities would be able to do. So again, if you have questions, you might want to get legal or financial counsel. You'll also want to prepare contingency plans for success or failure. Some platforms allow you to keep what you earn even if it's below your funding goal. But keep in mind that you'll have to adjust your project or raise additional funds if you don't get all the money that you anticipated. On the flip side, if you're massively successful, then you should have plans to expand or have something in place so that you can make use of those additional dollars. Kickstarter and Indiegogo allow you to add stretch goals if you're more successful, so that might be something to consider. And at the same time, you may want to consider if there is a tipping point for when success could actually be a disaster for your organization or your project, and you should have a plan for that. It's just basically important to be honest with your funders, depending on your success and failure. Once you've done all that research, you can determine your funding goal and then decide when to launch your campaign. There may be times of the year to avoid if you have other fundraisers or other appeals planned, and you may want to think about end-of-the-year donations, especially around this time of the year, and how they might affect your crowdfunding. And then you'll delegate responsibility to a person or a group because you really do need to have a point person in place for your crowdfunding campaign. The next step is to create your campaign. There are many different platforms out there. The most well-known is Kickstarter, but it may not be an option for all nonprofits because their terms of service require that you create something as part of your campaign. So Kickstarter might work if you're trying to finance a play, an artistic work, or create something that people could use or visit, but not if you're raising general funds. Indiegogo is a popular option for nonprofits because they don't have those same restrictions as Kickstarter. But then there's also Classy, Rally, Rocket Hub, Fundly, and other platforms. So I have a partial list on my LibGuide, and you might even come across others. Some of these, I'm going to open up my LibGuide just to give you a peek. And I want to point out that some platforms are set up to manage your general donations or your donate button on your website. They may have additional options for crowdfunding campaigns as well. So when you choose your platform, you might want to consider your other fundraising as well. Okay, so this is the LibGuide, and it has information about crowdfunding. And here is my list of platforms, and I tried to put some of the fees here so that you can kind of compare at a glance. Also here, there's articles and other information about crowdfunding for you to look through, but you can see that there are many different platforms available. And this link is in your handouts, but I'll also make sure it's posted on the blog after the session. Okay. The next step is to pick your funding model. That's one of the things in selecting your platform. There's two basic models, all or nothing and keep what you earn. With all or nothing, you create a sense of urgency because if you don't meet your goal, then you get nothing. So the Calgary Public Library Kickstarter campaign that we saw falls into that all or nothing category, and all Kickstarters are all or nothing. So if they don't raise $75,000, then they don't receive any of the funds that they've raised. So that's a little bit disappointing if at the end of all that work you walk away empty-handed. And the alternative to that is the keep what you earn model, and that's where you keep whatever it is that you raise, even if it's below your goal. And that ensures that your fundraising efforts aren't wasted, but sometimes there are additional fees if you still choose to collect your funds below that goal amount. So keep that in mind. And speaking of prices, there are fees involved with every platform. Pretty much every platform will have two fees built in, a fee per transaction, usually a percentage, and a payment processing fee, usually a percentage plus an additional flat amount. One exception that I've seen is Generosity by Indiegogo, which removes the fee per transaction so that you're only paying for that payment processing fee. But you're generally going to see those two fees. Some platforms have additional monthly or annual fees or a fee to get started, and that will really just depend on the platform and the features. With the features, you should just be clear on what you're going to need. If you want peer-to-peer fundraising built in, then some of those platforms do support that. Peer-to-peer fundraising is when volunteers or donors raise funds for you on their own pages. You can kind of think of this as the charity walks pages, where one person is walking and they're getting sponsors, and they do that through their own web page. So you're giving your money to them, but it's actually going to that larger organization that's sponsoring the walk. And some platforms do allow you to do peer-to-peer fundraising. It's a little bit different from conventional crowdfunding campaigns, but it may give you a little bit more flexibility if that's what you're looking for. Some platforms only allow you to run one fundraising campaign at a time, while others allow you to fundraise for different purposes. And some have more robust help desk support and features that might be appealing to you, although those more comprehensive platforms tend to be more expensive. You should check on the rules for nonprofits, and if you're not representing a nonprofit, then just make sure that you're clear on the rules for whoever you are. Typically, there is a process to become a verified nonprofit. You want to make sure that your donations will be tax deductible for your donors if you're a nonprofit. That process can vary. Usually there's some way that they verify, whether it's through the IRS list or GuideStar or something else. You also want to be clear on how donations will appear to donors on their receipts. If you have to provide proof of the tax-deductible contribution, or if that's coming directly from the platform. So for example, the Razoo is a platform that has their own foundation, and all of the funds, the proof of the funds is actually coming through their foundation, so it's automatically tax-deductible, or they have that tax-deductible proof, whereas with other platforms, the nonprofit may have to provide that separately. When you're looking at the release of funds, keep in mind that that will vary. It may not be automatic. They may release funds monthly or a few times a month, or it may be that it's at the end of the entire campaign and then it takes a few weeks or some time to receive your funds. And lastly, take a look at research, look at articles online. Comparisons of platforms are out there, and you may want to reach out to other nonprofits that have run campaigns to get their feedback. And even just looking at campaigns on a platform can give you an idea of what you like and don't like. Then once you've created the campaign, or once you've chosen your platform, I should say, you'll create your campaign. Most platforms allow you to customize the appearance to make it a bit more branded. It should look professional, so no spelling mistakes or errors. The graphics should be aesthetically pleasing, and you may want to get assistance from your marketing or graphic design department if you have one, or even just a friend or someone that you can go to who has a little bit more experience in those areas. But basically, you want it to look nice and friendly and appealing. Some platforms will walk you through the process, or they can help out, although that's usually for a fee. You'll select the time frame for your campaign. It really depends on how much you want to raise, but there's other factors to consider as well. More time doesn't always mean more money, and in fact, you want to maintain the momentum of the campaign, which gets harder the longer the campaign lasts. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. You'll set your funding levels as needed and incentivize people to give at a higher level. So what will $5 get or accomplish, or what would $10 get you or accomplish? If you're offering any incentives, which are usually tied to your funding levels, you need to have those in place as well. They might be things like t-shirts, posters, access to special events. We could sort of see in that example some of the incentives that they had pulled together. But just keep in mind the cost, the real cost of any incentives you're offering, because you don't want them to cut into the money that you're raising for your project. So when I was growing up, I was kind of always surprised when the PBS pledge drives came on, because you were spending $100 and all you got was an umbrella. But that's because you really do have to keep in mind the total cost of those incentives. And shipping can be a big issue. Consider shipping when you're pulling together your incentives. Most, although not all, platforms require you to include a video, but even if they don't, it's something to consider as a way to provide a personal appeal, a personal connection to your donors to explain what you're trying to fund. You don't need fancy equipment. You can still shoot a great video, and you should consider adding one. And lastly, make sure that your campaign looks good, that it reads well, that it is appealing to your donors that are finding it. There's usually a review period before you officially launch, and you can get people to take a look and give you feedback during that period. Okay, so I know this is a lot of information. Are there any questions? I just want to pause again here.
And again, you can ask questions at any time about any of the information that Andrea is going over. So we'll wait just another second to see if anything pops up. And I don't see anything as of now, so Andrea, feel free to go ahead.
Okay, great. So once you've created your campaign, you'll be communicating with your backers and your sharers and your supporters. It's not really a step because it's fluid. It happens at many different stages. But I put it here because you do want to communicate your campaign before it launches, and that's something I want to highlight. Your communication starts well before, and it's really crucial because you don't want it to be a surprise to your supporters that you are fundraising. We spoke a little bit earlier about your core group of backers, and these donors should be ready to hit donate as soon as your campaign launches. You'll need a bump in the beginning of your campaign that really looks good, and it shows other potential backers that you have the support of many other people. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to be the first person to donate, but once people see that, oh, others really think that this is a great project, they're more likely to start giving as well. Your supporters and sharers are all the people that will spread the word about your campaign, so you want to encourage them to get the word out. Lastly, have a plan in place to communicate throughout the campaign, and this is something that you can figure out before the launch. You need to know how to reach everyone in your community, everyone in your network. Traditionally, email is the best way to reach donors, especially if you already have a good open rate for messages. Social media is important, but shares and likes don't always translate into donations. Still, it's a great way to encourage and engage people who are supporting your campaign. You can send press releases, let the media know about your campaign, and then spread the word at events as well. These might be events that you're already hosting, or maybe you're figuring out creative events and programs to let people know about your campaign. And lastly, print mailings may be expensive, but if your donor base is really not tech savvy, then you may need to reach them offline and then walk them through the online donation process. Although if a lot of your donor base is actually offline, then maybe crowdfunding would be something that wouldn't be as useful, or maybe there would be other ways to raise funds. But even walking people through the online donation process might be necessary if you want to engage all of your donors. All right, you've already done all of this work, and now more work is just beginning. Launching your campaign is not the end. Your campaign doesn't run itself. You'll need to monitor the activity continuously. and not really step away from it. You'll implement your communication plan and encourage your backers and your sharers and your supporters to get the word out. You'll keep that going, try to keep the momentum going throughout your launch and throughout your campaign. You'll need to check in fairly continuously. If donors have questions or they need information, someone should be available to give them timely responses, and you never know when those things are going to pop up. As you reach milestones, communicate your successes. Some donors really do wait to see how successful a campaign is before they decide to contribute. And always say thank you. And this isn't just an automatically generated thank you. A personal thank you really does go a long way. Your backers feel that they've become invested in your nonprofit and invested in your project when they contribute. So you should start to think about them as partners and really let them know how grateful you are. So I wanted to show a couple other examples. I don't think I have enough time to go through all of these, but I did want to show an example of an Indiegogo campaign. This is Battle on the Booming Grounds. This was a film for PBS. The documentary filmmakers had already filmed it. They had the distributor for were going to be able to show this on PBS, but they needed $30,000 for post-production. They had a $30,000 goal, and unfortunately they didn't meet that. However, they still raised $26,000. And I believe that they will still be collecting that funding, so the money that they have to make up isn't really too much. I hope that they'll be able to do that. But you can see that Indiegogo looks very similar to Kickstarter. We have that financial information. They have a video. We have very easy ways to share. And I want to point out that they had 1,300 shares on Facebook and 197 people contributed. So that's, again, what I mean by you can't just rely on social media and those shares and likes and tweets and everything. That doesn't automatically mean that people are going to give. But I'll just scroll down real quick so you can see some of the pictures of these prairie chickens. And they, again, had great funding levels, great explanation of what the money was going to be used for. So I'm sorry to show you all of this stuff when the campaign is closed, so it's no longer, can't really contribute to this, but just to show you, again, how similar these things are. And I'll stay in here. I want to show another Kickstarter campaign. This one was very popular through the Smithsonian to restore Neil Armstrong's spacesuit. And they had a $500,000 goal that they met pretty early in the campaign. And so they added a stretch goal to also restore Alan Shepard's spacesuit. And they met that goal as well. So all told, they raised over $700,000. And this is another campaign that had a lot of reward levels. Here's where they explain their stretch goals. They had a lot of pictures in here as well. And I think that this was a compelling ask for people around the country, not even people who would necessarily go to see the spacesuit at the Smithsonian, but people who are interested in history, space nerds, and this is a great Kickstarter campaign. All right, so let me go back. And I'll say the Dub Smash Wars is another interesting way of looking at the at crowdfunding. Maybe I will take you there. Because rather than just having one campaign with those levels, through Crowdrise, which is the same platform that the Ocean First Foundation used, they were able to fundraise for 2 different organizations. And the fundraising, when you donated, it was a vote for a video, but also for the charity. And so they had the cast members from Agent Carter and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. doing the videos, and then so you were voting for the teams, and like I said, also making the donations. So crowdfunding doesn't even have to be a strict, this is the project, these are your levels. There are ways to get more creative with it, and there are platforms that support that creativity. All right. So why is all of that preparation so important? Well, the main thing I want to mention here is that if you chart out the amount of money that campaigns typically raise over the course of their campaigns, in general it looks a little something like this. There's typically a big bump in the beginning, and that's from those core group of backers who anticipate your campaign and they're ready to hit donate. And then there's usually a bump at the end from donors who forgot to donate or were waiting for the deadline. For some campaigns, it does come down to the final hours, minutes, seconds, whether or not they're successful. Sometimes there are bumps that occur in the middle, but in general, there's a little bit of a lull. The bumps in the middle can come from maybe email blasts, if you're covered by media, if you have events where you're talking up your campaign. Those things can give you small bumps in the middle, but in general you're having a big bump in the beginning, a big bump at the end, and then a lull in the middle. And this is what that looks like. So I wanted to compare, the first one is the Reboot the Suit for Neil Armstrong spacesuit. And you can see they had a huge bump at the start. They actually made their goal very early on in the first couple days. And then they have a smaller bump at the end, but it does drop down in the middle. The Idea Lab, which we saw first, the Kickstarter at the Calgary Public Library, they have less of a big bump in the beginning, and then it really trailed off. And I hate to say it, but I doubt that this Kickstarter will actually fund. And I'd be interested to see what happened that made that little spike early on, but it does make me suspect that maybe they didn't get the word out as early as they could have, but I'm not sure. But this one, you can definitely see how it dropped off, and we'll have to see if it comes back up at the end, although I don't know that they're close enough to their goal to make it. Oh, and I want to mention here as well, the Reboot the Suit, that was a 30-day campaign, and they met their goal. And that was for $500,000. The Idea Lab was for $100,000, and they had 40 days. So the time frame, it doesn't always correlate longer for more money. There's other factors to consider. Okay, so after you've launched and after you have your outcome, no matter what it is, you'll have your follow-up. And remember to always say thank you. Even if you don't reach your goal, you want to continue to foster a relationship with your donors and turn them into supporters in the future. Keep them updated. Since now they're invested in your project, they want to know what's happening with their funds. The ALS Association has actually done a really great job with this after the Ice Bucket Challenge. We all remember that from, was it last summer, the summer before? And that wasn't traditional crowdfunding, but a lot of people contributed to that. And about a month or two ago this year, there was a flurry of media coverage that the research that was funded using the funds from the Ice Bucket Challenge had resulted in a big breakthrough for Alzheimer's disease. And it isn't a coincidence that they were sharing that information. It was part of a larger plan to keep the association in the public eye, to continue to thank donors, to foster goodwill by showing that the donations that they received really mattered, and to encourage people to keep donating because their dollars really make a difference. So I thought that that was very well done. A great example of the kind of follow-up that needs to happen in crowdfunding as well. Whatever is happening after your campaign, you should communicate it with your backers. Even if it's setbacks, people want to be kept in the loop. But hopefully you're communicating progress, and they want to know those good things as well. Really, really important. Do what you said you would do, even if it's harder than you thought. When you launch your campaign, you're making a promise to your donors. And this is really why your preparation is so important, because now once you have the funds, you have to do what you said. And even if you plan for everything, there may be setbacks and problems, but you have to, in the end, do what you said you would do. If you don't, at best, you won't have a good reputation, and people will be angry, and they just won't give you money in the future. At the worst, you might get sued, and some campaigns are, the people who ran some campaigns, usually for products, are starting to be sued if they don't follow through and they walk away with the money. So you don't really want to have a situation like that. You'll also want to look in your follow-up for opportunities to convert your one-time backers into regular donors. Your campaign might be their first introduction to your nonprofit, so this may be an opportunity to get them to continue supporting you or come to your programs or just be a larger part of your organization. So we want less about you should be ashamed of yourself and much more about I'm so delighted to help. And I want to take us back to our steps again because there's an important piece that I sort of left out but I have been alluding to. And that's really that the very foundation of your campaign is building and fostering a community. So whether you're a nonprofit, a business, an artist, musician, or just an individual running a crowdfunding campaign, a big part of being successful is identifying your community, and that's the people who are or could be invested in you and what you're trying to accomplish. It's more than just communication and who you have contact information for, and it's more than just the people who are in your geographic proximity. It's really about building a community of people who care. If you've never done that before, it's kind of a combination of positioning yourself virtually, so online, and physically, where you can be the most visible, and aligning yourself with stakeholders who have the influence to widen your network with theirs. Also in a community, you give back as much as you receive, and so being a really big part of that. You can build your community into your crowdfunding campaign at every level. So even when you're planning your project, are you getting feedback from your community? Maybe you have focus groups. Maybe you're getting people to somehow influence the thing that you will eventually be raising funds for. You'll select your campaign platform, that fundraising platform, based on maybe where your community is or what they're already familiar with. And we already talked about how important it is to foster that community through your communication, throughout your launch, getting in touch with your supporters and your sharers, and then in your follow-up, making sure that people feel like they're a part of the story of your nonprofit at the very end, and that they want to continue to help you, not just with money, but maybe with their time or other things, just being able to contribute. Okay. So final thoughts. Crowdfunding is a lot of work. So I've been talking nonstop about everything that's involved, and I'm sure that there's still things that I've left out, but there is quite a bit involved. But it can be worth it. I hope that some of the examples that I showed can really illustrate the good things that can come out of crowdfunding for nonprofits. But a lot of it is about doing your homework and being fully prepared. As one filmmaker quoted in his Kickstarter, or after his successful Kickstarter, it takes 20 years to make an overnight success. Start with picking the best platform for you and make sure that you take your time and read all of the terms of service. A lot of communication, because if people don't know your campaign is happening, then you certainly won't get funded. You should put in a lot of time before, during, and after to maximize your network of backers and build that community. But then again, potato salad. You might just happen to get $55,000 for wanting to make a potato salad. And lastly, good luck. It is a lot of work, but there is payoff. And thank you so much for attending today, and I'll take any questions that may have come through. But if you think of something later or there's something I didn't address but you don't have time to put it into that question box, you can always email or call me. I'd be happy to talk to you.
We do actually have we do actually have a couple of questions, Andrea.
Okay, great.
Patricia asks, what happens to the money if you have an all or nothing campaign? Does it get deducted or just goes back to the platform? So I guess with an all or nothing platform like Kickstarter.
So with an all or nothing campaign, if it's not fully funded, if it doesn't reach its goal, the money is returned to the donors. So I don't know if you technically call it, it's sitting in escrow, but at the end of the campaign, it just goes back.
Yeah. And Michael asked if the various providers place time limits on the campaigns. So does each platform sort of limit their campaigns, I guess, based on the different, like Kickstarter has a certain amount, Indiegogo sort of restricts it to a certain amount, or do you pick it?
I believe that you pick it. I might have to double check with that. I think that they typically have guidelines, but I believe that it's up to you. Although I'll look into that, and that's something that I will address on the Lunchtime Learning blog after this session. So
Okay.
Stay tuned.
Okay. And another question from Michael is, do the providers do anything to independently market or increase the awareness of campaigns that they carry without additional cost? In other words, is any marketing included in the basic fees of the different crowdfunding sites?
Typically, no. Sometimes the platforms will feature certain campaigns. Kickstarter does that. You'll become a Kickstarter featured thing, but it's not something that you pay more for. It's something that they may select based on your performance. And some may just, if you were to go to that platform's homepage, some campaigns may be featured there or appear there. But as far as I know, that's not something you pay extra for. It's just something that they select.
Right. Let's see. And Vicky asked, she's been asked by another friend who's raising funds in another state for a play that she's helping to support. They have major funding for the launch, but they need money to help pay the actors. It's for a one-night event. Is there a platform that you recommend for trying to enlist others to donate?
I don't have a platform to recommend. I would recommend taking a look at all of them. I'd say that it's unlikely that someone will go to the platform independent of knowing about your campaign and then stumble upon your campaign. So you're not really selecting a platform based on it giving you more visibility. I mean, that could be a side effect, but you're selecting your campaign knowing that you're sending a link out to the people in your network or in your community. I think that Rocket Hub, I believe that's the one I'm thinking of, does have a little bit more for the arts, but I could look into that. But I would say select the platform that you feel most comfortable with, that falls in your price range, and then also maybe consider if the people that you'll be asking to donate are already familiar with a certain platform.
And lastly, Sherry asked if we could just post the blog address again.
Sure, I can pull it. Well, can I pull it? I think I can pull it up. This is very slow. Sorry. We go to our website. I'll show you how to get there from our website, but the URL will also come up. So from here, if you scroll down to the bottom, there's a link for blogs. I should also point out that up at the top, we have a link here for blogs. It's this blue paper icon. And then you can just select from here Lunchtime Learning blog. And then it will appear in this list. I do have a follow-up from the in-person class, It's Better with a Crowd. I did tweak the presentation a little bit, so the slides I have up on the LibGuide right now are a little bit different from the ones that I presented today, but there is a follow-up with a little bit more information about finding a lawyer or an accountant, and also someone had asked about how Indiegogo got its name, so you can go there to find out a little bit more.
Okay, and I think that covers it for all of the questions. So I think that wraps up today's webinar. Again, thank you so much for spending your lunch hour with us. You should be receiving an evaluation form. It would be a great help to us if you filled that out, as feedback really does help us understand how to make our webinars even better, as well as plan for future programming. So thanks again.